I just want to welcome Andy Campbell today. I'm excited to hear his story. I think that we will all be inspired by him. Andy, would you tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate it. I am continue to be in a lifelong process of overcoming what I call setbacks. I call them setbacks because while they not to lessen the impact of the events in my life, but I frame them that way so that I see myself moving forward after them. It's because I think words and context matter to the human brain and how we frame up things, which are not a lie. We're not lying to ourselves. We're just asking ourselves to think about a problem differently. And so I'm in the process of overcoming a few setbacks, some of which are things like childhood sexual abuse, the death of my mother, the estrangement from my father, my own diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and that's coming up on 7 years ago. Um, so I'm not dead yet. And then 4 years ago, finding the body of my son who had taken his own life. So that's kind of what I speak about and what I speak to. I was drawn to your podcast because of the title. Hope is an incredibly powerful thing. I think we have to have hope and a meaning, like Viktor Frankl talked about, man's search for meaning. We have to have meaning in which to hope. And I think that's what I work to share with people is if you're at a spot where you feel like you're going to give up or you don't see a path forward, do not give up. There is a path forward. And that's what I hope to encourage people to do.
Well, that alone is very encouraging. Of course, the word hope means a lot to me as well. So I am excited to hear more about how you have applied that in your story because I know you have a story of resilience. I know you have endured and overcome quite a bit. So,
Continuing to overcome.
and
Those
overcoming.
things hold with you, but I think it's an active effort. Along the years, I collected these things that I eventually came to call my core beliefs, the things that kind of anchor me against the storm and then give me the ability to walk forward when the worst of it is past. I'm a visual person, so I describe things in kind of imagery as opposed to I'm not, I wouldn't say great with the English language, but to me, when you speak, I see pictures. I hear pictures, right? I don't actually hear words that you say. So I apologize if it gets a little bit panoramic, I guess, in the way I describe it. But they became these 15 core beliefs that would help me weather the storm and then give me, as the storm started to subside, give me the ability to start moving forward again. And that's kind of the idea behind the setbacks. You get set back by this thing that shows up. It's terrible. It's difficult. You're not sure you can survive it, but somehow you do. And then the objective becomes how do you move forward out of it, right? How do you move forward out of it? And that can sometimes take years. It's taken me almost a lifetime to leave some of those things or to confront those things where I could continue to move forward without such a weight from, say, childhood sexual abuse that affected me in ways that I had no idea. So I think you have to actively pursue, you have to actively pursue hope. You have to actively pursue getting, when I say better, I mean like a better you, right? Like you have to actively pursue that. It's not just going to happen. Like, after the loss of our son, we didn't just miraculously somehow not get stuck in that moment, right? We had to actively work through horrible times. I wish that on no one. Like, I can't think of someone that I would hate so much as to wish that on them. But when people talk about getting stuck, like in the case of the suicide of our son, I think at some point we decided that we could either stay with him where he was in that moment, those last moments, or we could move forward and bring him with us, right? There was a choice. I think a lot of people decide to stay in that moment because they think they're leaving the person behind. And it doesn't have to be suicide. It could just be the loss of a relative, loss of a friend, loss of a spouse. My father went through that. He stayed basically in the death of my mother. He could just never quite move past that, right? I would ask him years and years later, like, well, what's the purpose of your life? And he said, to be buried beside your mother. And I thought, well, that's
Oh,
that's really going to suck if you live another 30 years. And he did. And it did suck for him, because he couldn't take her with him. He stayed there. So I think you have to actively think and work through these things.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where the core beliefs kind of came in. They were things, they were ideas that I had written down, pictures that I'd put down in short phrases that would help me remember, or I could refer back to them as ways to help me kind of step out as the storm subsided, how to kind of step forward.
Can you tell us maybe a couple of those core beliefs? I know you may not have to go over all 15, but just
Yeah.
a couple of them to give us a little taste of what you've worked through.
No one outruns the universe
Mhm.
is kind of a big one for me, but I'll probably go to the second one, which is there are no hard decisions. There's only hard consequences.
Mm.
What I think I have observed, what makes decisions difficult is not the decision. Most of the time, there is a still small voice that tells you what you should do,
Mm.
right? Like it's there. We have to get quiet and listen to it, whether that's through prayer or meditation or, even especially in the darkest times, because that's when the negative voices are so loud. They get so loud. And that's kind of one of the ways I judge which voice to listen to is because if it's loud, that's probably not a good one, right? Like
Mm.
that's probably not the good voice because I think the still small voice is usually, if not always, more wise than the loud voice. But you have to get to that place and listen. So I think there are no hard decisions, there are only hard consequences. For me, it represents humans' tendency to take perceived consequences of a decision. Like we perceive that, I'll use the example of when I decided to stop chemotherapy. When I decided to stop chemotherapy, I knew that the chemo was killing me faster. It had been killing the cancer. I had made significant progress, unexpected progress, at least unexpected by some of the doctors, but it was killing me faster than it was killing the cancer. So I knew like there was this little voice in my head that said, it's time to stop.
Mm.
And it just started around, I did 16 rounds of a chemo called FOLFIRINOX, which is basically they just throw the kitchen sink at it, right? They don't know what to do. So they just throw FOLFIRINOX at it. And it's three chemos in one. So you go in on one day. It takes 6 or 7 hours to get two of the three chemos in you. And then all the accoutrements that they put with it, right? Like they got to put glucose, they got to put steroids in, they got to, to keep the inflammation down. They got to put antihistamines in to keep you from, like they put all this stuff around it because it's really just poison. So they put all this stuff around it to try to keep your body from reacting adversely. And then they hook you up to a pump. So I had a port in my chest and they hooked the pump up and I take the pump for 2.5 days, well, 42 hours. And then on the third day they removed the pump. So I would have that because they couldn't put it in me. They can't put the third chemo in anybody all at one time because it'll kill you. And so I remember they handed me a hazmat bag the first day when I walked out, and I was like, "What's this for?" And they said, "Well, in the unlikely event that it comes, the port disconnects or the tube disconnects from the pump and you spill any, make sure you put everything in this bag and call the fire department." And I said, "Wait a second. Are you telling me that what you're putting in, if it spills out of me, it's a hazmat situation?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah, got to call hazmat." And I was like, "Are we sure this is a good idea?" And they were like, "Andy, it's what we have." And so by the 12th one, I really started having some severe side effects. And by the 15th one, I was like, I'm done. I'm out. There was this voice in my head that said, it's like you have to stop. You have to stop. And it gave me images of what was happening. I felt like a baseball where the strings had come loose and the cover was coming off. I was convinced like at some point my organs would just start bleeding. Like that's just the way I felt. And so I thought about it and the consequences. I realized later that what I thought were the consequences that were most likely a little bit of time, without chemo. So I probably would give myself another 6, maybe a year of life. But then the last quarter of that was probably going to be really bad. Like that was going to be a tough death. And I'd seen my mother die from breast cancer and three of her sisters, and she had a fighting spirit. And it was if you got a fighting spirit, it's not always an easy way to go. So I thought, well, then I'm going to leave my wife. I don't want to leave my wife. We've been together this October to be 37 years, and I didn't want to leave her, and I didn't want to leave my children at 4 at the time. I didn't want to leave. So it was all these negative things, right? It was just all these negative things. And so what I realized later was that in that moment, I only saw the really negative consequences. What happened was I quit the chemo. I did listen to that like one of the few times. I mean, I'm sure there were other times that I'd listened to that still small voice, but not as often as I should have. But I did in that moment, and I went to my wife and I said, "I'm done. I'm done." She said, "Well, we should go talk to this." I went to my physician, general physician. I said, "Look, I'm done." And he said, "It can't be done. You're making progress. You got." I said, I'm done. You understand? Can't do it. Okay. And I explained to him what was going on. He finally said, okay, I tell you what, I've been doing a bunch of research. He's just a wonderful human being, and which falls into another one of my core beliefs, having insatiable curiosity. And he's just insatiably curious. So he had been researching and found this thing at the University of San Francisco, California. They were using fasting as a way to counteract the side effects of chemotherapy. And then there was this other thing. Fasting was not as big 7 years ago as it is today. And so he convinced me to do it. He wanted me to do a 20-day water only fast. I would go to his office every other day. And I was like, it took a little while to convince me, but I decided I wasn't going to do chemo and I didn't want to quit. So I would try it. I got to 10 days water only. Water and black coffee is all I had for 10 days. It reset my immune system. I came out of it feeling completely different. I had these weird cravings. I had to eat one watermelon a day. Luckily, it was summer. I'd eat one watermelon a day, and I prior to that would only eat milk chocolate. Wasn't a big fan of milk chocolate really, but I hated dark chocolate. And when I came out of it, now like if it's less than 70% cocoa, I can't eat it. So it was watermelon and dark chocolate. I don't know what happened. Ended up doing, he convinced me to do another 5-day fast after that and then do one more round of chemo. But the chemo, it was a hopes that maybe it would set aside the side effects. It didn't. So I was done. In that time frame, my oldest daughter, who is now a physician herself, but at that time, she had begun investigating this genetic mutation that we got from my mother, which is BRCA1, BRCA, BRCA1 mutation. And she had found somehow through this organization she had contacted, she found the only clinical trials being done in the country for people with a BRCA mutation that had pancreatic cancer. And it was at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And my wife called and I was exhausted. I was done. Like I was out. And she called and at first they told her no, it was closed. They weren't sure. But she hadn't been actually speaking with the trial coordinator. And so she insisted on speaking with the trial coordinator. And when she did, the trial coordinator said, he's the perfect candidate. Can you get him here by Monday? We booked a flight and I went there. The doctors were like, we've seen this before. I was no longer somebody they hadn't seen because in my local area, nobody had seen it, so they didn't know. They're like, we know exactly what's going on. We think we know pretty well why you're having the response you are, and we think we can help you. Let's try it. And I went into that, and I'm here 7 years later. The point of all of that story is to say, nowhere in my thinking on the day I decided to stop chemo was there any thought that, Andy, if you stop chemo, you will then do a fast, which will reset your immune system. You will then prove to yourself through another round of chemo that you can't do chemo anymore. But during that 90 days, your daughter will find a trial and you will go into that trial of which you will be a good candidate for it and it will work. Like nowhere in my thinking did that have. So I looked back on it and I thought, wow, the decision was actually really straightforward. I had this still small voice that told me what to do. Like in that moment, I was desperate. What do I do? It told me what to do. Now, some people say, well, that's God. That's your intuition. That's your subconscious. There was that little thing that told me, and it basically said, have hope and do this, right? Don't give up and do this. But all the consequences were hard. So I think what humans do is they pick up the difficulty of the consequences that they think will happen, but we can't really tell the future. So you don't know if they're going to happen, right? But we pick up what we perceive to be the hard consequences, and then we put them on top of the decision. And people say, well, that's just a really hard decision. No, it's probably not a hard decision. You actually probably know what you should do. You just don't want to confront the potential consequences. And you're only seeing one side of the ledger. So that's kind of the core belief in a nutshell is it reminds me to make sure that I'm not putting on top of a decision. I'm not allocating to the decision the fear of consequences because the decision, if I listen and I spend time contemplating, I probably will come up with the decision should be.
Right, right. And I like that too because it really kind of simplifies it down to just one step at a time. Like make that
Oh,
decision.
yeah.
And then, because Martin Luther King Jr. said something about we only see that first step. We don't always know what the next, even the next or future steps would be, but being obedient to that still small voice, which I'd be in the camp to believe that was God.
Yeah, as well, take it for what it is, think that's why the 12 steps call it a higher power. I believe that it is, in my belief system, it would be the Holy Spirit kind of guiding one. And I think there's benefits to getting yourself in a position where you can listen, making the conscious decision to refuse to listen to the loud voice. I think that's a big step. Like everybody's like, listen to the small voice. Well, inside of that is the decision to not listen to the loud voice. I would say the same thing to anyone who was considering taking their own life or they've had suicidal ideations is look, the pain will not go with you. The pain doesn't leave. It actually, when you leave, your pain will stay. It will spread to everyone you know. It will spread to people that love you, and then to people you just know, and then to people you don't know. They will just hear about it. And so I learned with my mother through her determination and perseverance through her 11-year journey battling cancer, struggling against it. She taught me how to live through those 11 years of dying. She was an example of how to live. And what she left was the foundation of these core beliefs, which is determination and perseverance and finish the race. Do not pull yourself out of the race. Because I think you have to give the creator a chance to say yes.
Yeah.
Right? Like you got to stay long enough to give him a chance to say yes. And it might not happen on your time frame. So if you're thinking about pulling out of this race and leaving here, just know that, when you do that, and it may not be a concern for that a person that is having suicidal ideations, but know that your pain will not go with you. People will not be better off without you. They won't be. They'll be worse off without you, even if you think, well, they hate me or they don't like me. Doesn't matter. That pain will infect everything. And then what you will have left in the fabric of the universe is that pain. It is far better to stay here and confront the pain, work diligently to make a decision to not listen to that loud voice. I don't believe there's ever that still small voice that tells you to take your own life. I think it's a very loud voice telling you this is hopeless. Your life is meaningless and you are causing other people pain, and the pain you feel will go away if you just end it. And I would say to people, maybe there's one person who would be open to it, say that is not the case. That loud voice is lying to you. It will only be worse for everyone. And just know that you're not only is your life not worthless or hopeless, you are incredibly important as a thread in the fabric of the universe. And that what you want to leave is what my mother left, determination and perseverance. And that comes from confronting, first, telling the loud voice no. Second, confronting the pain and working to remove the pain. Because if you remove the pain or lessen it, eventually the legacy that you will leave, the imprint on the universe that you will leave, will be one of determination, perseverance, and overcoming. And I think that spreads generationally. All of us spread something generationally, right?
We have a generational impact, and we
Yeah.
we do get to choose what that's going to be. I believe completely that we do.
We do. That's what you just said is, I think, incredibly important for people to somehow even just tuck it away in the back of the head, and maybe one day it comes around. You have a choice as to the imprint you leave on the universe, right? You do have that choice. And I would say that choice is, isn't it's just probably the most important choice that you will make because it permeates everything, right? I mean, if you do something and your family comes apart, uh, you know, what imprint are you leaving on the universe? Work to at least work to not. And I'm not saying you stay in abusive relationships and all those things. I'm saying a lot of times people just get frustrated. Go back and work on that, right? Like don't
Yeah.
make a choice. I think that's a very important concept, practical application of your decision making is
Yes.
to decide what you want to leave. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to, but the characteristics, you do have a choice as to what you will leave.
Yes. And I'll say this too. I was encouraged recently by a friend that shared that we talk about leaving a legacy, but we also get to live that legacy. We can choose right now to walk in that legacy that we're going to leave for our future generations. And so, for example, walking in love. I mean, that's a big one for me, hoping that all of the people, of course, my family first, but then outward from that, any people that I in any way touch their lives, I hope that that's one of the messages that they get from my life. And I hope that I'm walking in it now, but that are
Yeah.
to live past me.
Yeah. Oh, my mother used to, I don't do this, so I won't pretend that I have this kind of heart. But my mother, who was a very determined, she came from a hard life and she could be very hard. And it served her well. She was, like I said, determined and she would persevere. She meant she was finishing the race. The race would have to take her. She was not going to quit the race. That was just her way of looking at the world. But a side that people who didn't know her well would not see is she kept a drawer full of cards.
Mm.
when sending people cards was, a
Mhm.
big deal. And they were for every occasion. She had just a drawer of them. She knew everybody's birthday, everybody's anniversary, whenever a child was born, whenever someone in the family passed. She had a stack. And at that moment, as soon as she heard about something, out went the cards. And I can't tell you how many people after she passed away showed up at her funeral or told me later what an impact it had. These are just little things, but she just kind of felt that that was her way to show love to people. And it turns
Absolutely.
out it did. In just her everyday life, it worked out that way.
Yeah. And you know what's neat is through what you've seen with her, it's made an impact, obviously and clearly, on you
Oh,
and how
yeah.
you're living your life and some of these core beliefs that you have and you carry with you. And you're having an impact. So it's intergenerational and it keeps going. It's like a ripple effect and it just can go outward really for much farther than we even can probably imagine. Because even people listening to this podcast today, we may not know any of them. You know what I'm saying? Like there's people out there.
Oh,
We don't
yeah.
know how far it's going to reach out and what an
No.
impact it might have because I do believe, as you've said a few times now, I 100% believe that our words do have meaning. And what we say, it makes a difference for people. It makes a difference for us, our internal words that we say to ourselves, like what you were saying about the voices, as far as like, I look at that too, as a lot like towards cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes.
You take your thoughts captive scripturally
Yep.
and
Yep.
renew your mind with
Yep.
truth and with scripture and with things that are going to bring life and love to you and to others. But whenever we do those things with our own language, with our own words we speak, plus outwardly with others, the impact is immeasurable. It really is.
So, that I will mention that one of my core beliefs is never try, always work.
Mm,
And it goes to this idea, or for me, this belief that words matter.
yes.
And that to me, the word try is it is a word that personally I know people use a lot, but I found, and I think this is kind of how I would hope that people would kind of adapt and adopt these core beliefs to the way that it fits them. For me, the word try represents an effort, almost a more of a mental effort, like I tried.
Mhm.
It didn't work out, but I tried. Where the word work to me means that I put in real effort. I may not achieve that goal, but I put in the effort. I got in the race and I ran it. And, I put my shoulder to the grindstone, all these cliches, right? But, trying is just like, well, I came up and I kind of pushed on it. I kind of tried. And I know that a lot of people don't see the word try that way. So what I'm saying is that for me, though, I did see the word try that way. And so now I work really diligently and I will correct myself even after all these years of believing that, I will still correct myself whenever I say the word try. If somebody says, when I say, well, I'll try, that's not the same thing. Like if somebody invited you to their home for dinner and you say, I'll try, that's different than if you say, I will work to be there,
Right.
right? It just, to me, it just takes on a different level of effort. I'm going to move things around. I'm going to put effort into, I will be at your dinner. I don't know. The other one just feels like, I'll kind of do my best. If things work out, I'll be there.
It's a different level of commitment, is what I'm
It
hearing.
is. Yeah, I think
Completely
so.
different level of commitment. Right.
So like if you're going through cancer or something, to me, it matters that, that you're working at it. Like I put in work. I can't control everything in the cancer. I can't control really anything with the cancer. But I can work to go to the chemotherapy. I can work to go to Philadelphia to do the trial. I can work to take them. I can work to do my energy work, acupuncture, meditation, prayer. I can work guided imagery. I can work to investigate and find supplements that will help weaken the cancer cells, right? Because I don't believe there's one silver bullet. You have to kind of have a lot of things going to weaken and eventually terminate cancer cells. So I just think it is a different level of commitment. I will say that personally, I did not try to stay alive with cancer.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean I was going to survive it, but I was determined to work at it.
That's really good. I'm sure there's people and listeners here that will be very encouraged by your words today. I do know that you have a book. You want to tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, thank you. It kind of came out of, at some point, I had written down these 15 core beliefs and a couple of people said, well, you should write something. You've been through a few things and recently the cancer and the suicide. And so you should write about that, but I didn't want to write about that, right? I didn't want to write about those things. So I decided to write a short book about the 15 core beliefs. And so I list them in the book. It's called the book. is called Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks, Turning Challenges into Opportunities. And I think to me, that's what these 15 core beliefs are. It's on Amazon. You can search for my name, Andy Campbell, and it should pop up. It was just a way for me to put these down and offer them to people who might be in a situation like I've been, where things seemed hopeless or they weren't sure what to do next. I think your point about taking it one step at a time, I think that's, they don't really tell you, if you've heard this saying, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Yes, I say that a lot.
Okay, so I watched this video one time, this YouTube video of a pack of hyenas. There was this large bull elephant, and he had died, right? Old age, he just died. It wasn't a battle or something, he just died. And he's laying there, and this pack of hyenas come up on this elephant. And to them, that's like, man, this is like a buffet, right? Like, this is what they've been looking for. They don't have to fight for it. It's there for the taking. The problem is the elephant's hide is so tough that there is no place that they can chew through.
Mm.
They can't get to what they need. And so they start with, I thought this just super interesting as kind of like this around this cliche of how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time. They actually start at the anus,
Oh no.
the worst possible place to start. And they have to work their way through because that's the only place on the elephant
Uh,
that there's no hide and they can't get through
wow.
the hide. And I just thought, wow, nobody ever tells you that when they say eat the elephant one bite at a time. You might have to start at the really bad end of the problem
Wow.
and work your way toward goodness. So the idea of writing these things down was to give people encouragement that your setback may be made of hide so tough you don't know how you're going to get through it. And your only way to get through it might be starting at the really bad end of it. But if you persevere, if you apply some of these 15 core beliefs, I believe that you will work your way through that problem. You'll work your way out the other end of that problem, and through it, it will, oddly enough, paradoxically, it will actually give you what you need to survive. So, yeah, I think that's something that people don't tell you when they say, I never said, I said that saying forever, yeah, just eat the elephant one bite at a time. But I never thought about it until I saw a visual. I was like, oh, that's the difficult part of it is that you may have to start at the place you don't want to start. Like you just want to start. The hyenas just wanted the lungs and heart. That's all they wanted, right? Like just get me to that. And the elephant's like, no, you got to go the
Uh-huh.
other direction to get to the good stuff. And I think that's a lesson in life. So that's why I wrote the book was to tell people have meaning in life, keep your hope, and even if you have to start at the bad end of this elephant, if you persevere, if you're determined, you will be able to finish the race.
That's really powerful visually and also with
Yeah.
with the words.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I mean,
that.
it was kind of revelatory to me, like I was like, wow, so this is why,
Mm.
you know, this is why it's always difficult to get, the beginning of a problem is the hardest place to start. It's like, well, it's like after my son's suicide, it's like, well, I kind of kept that thought in my mind. It's like things are going to be really bad now. Things are going to be bad. But if we don't quit, we will get through this. It will never leave us, but it won't break us. I think it was a combination of those two things, right? And then my grandmother told me one time she lost a child. And she told me that after she lost her son, it was their sixth child, youngest child, she lost him. And she told me that she could not see color afterwards, that the whole world went black and white. Everything, the sky, the trees, people, everybody was black and white. She said it was the darkest place she'd ever been in her life. And but she did not quit. She very religious woman, so she read her Bible all the time. She prayed. She went to church. She did all these things, but it wouldn't relent. And so she went for months and months and months with the world black and white. And she told me that one day she woke up and the world was color again. And she didn't know what happened. She just knew that if you didn't quit, no matter how black and white the world was, eventually it would come back to color. And so I held on to that, after we lost our son. And I've worked to share that with my wife and my children that, it's a very dark world right now, but the color will come back. We're at the back end of the elephant right now, and we've got to work our way through this. And if we don't quit, the color will come back. It may just take years. And I would say it's, The color has returned with some daily moments of gray, right? But that's a lot better than it was 4 years ago. So again, I would just encourage people, whatever you do, do not quit.
But, well, and this just kind of makes me want to ask a question that I noted what you said earlier about you guys chose to, instead of staying where he left, to
Yeah.
bring him forward with you. And I thought it might be really good for our listeners to hear what is something practical, like what is a way that y'all have done that that might encourage a listener who's maybe struggling.
Yeah, I would say that it is a painful, arduous journey. It just is. And so there is no way that it's going to be less than that. I would say come to terms with it. However, you're never prepared for these things. You can't be, whether it's the loss of a spouse, loss of a friend, loss of a child. You may know that things come. Ours told us when he was 9 that he saw no point in living. That he did. He was a very high IQ individual, which was probably part of his downfall. He saw things very black and white, very black and white. Oh, life was you were born, it was painful, you were going to die. Why don't we just skip that middle part? And he could never quite. We actually thought at one point that he had worked himself through it, but obviously he hadn't. So I think some of these are choices, Stephanie, and it may feel like you're lying to yourself, but you're not lying to yourself. It's the lie that yourself is telling you that you have to overcome. And so one of those things is that his choice was not my choice. His choice was not my choice. That I wanted to live, I still want to live, and his choice to not finish the race should not prevent me from finishing my race. That's the first thing. His choice will not dictate to me my choices. It's very close to taking my wife down. They were very close. He was our youngest child. Very close to my wife became hopeless after that. But we struggled and stayed here and worked through it. And so I would say something practical for people to apply is that you have choice. Their choice is not your choice. I did not choose for him to leave. I wish every day that that were not the case. Every anniversary of his passing, every time his birthday, every time something happens with the family, it's always there. The reason I say we decided, I think people, we'd go to these grief groups, and sadly, there's way too many groups for parents who have lost a child to suicide. And I would listen to people talk, and we were in a group locally that, had gone through suicide. And not all of them were children, might have been husband, wife's friend, whatever, but they had been impacted by it. And I realized that some of those people, like, what does it mean to not be stuck? Right? Like people would say, well, you can't get stuck. It's like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like, I don't know. Like, what does that mean? And what I think I observed was that people who were, you know, stuck, quote unquote, I'm doing kind of the
Yeah.
lobster fingers, right? People who are stuck are staying in that moment in time when that person left.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, then maybe the converse of being stuck is being unstuck. And then so you can't, so then the way to do that is not stay with them there, but continue forward. But
Mhm.
then that feels like you're leaving them behind, right? Like I'm leaving them behind. And then I saw this visual, and it showed on one side of the chart, it was like your loss. Okay.
Mhm.
And it took up the entire frame of the picture was your loss. It was just a big black hole. And then it showed over time that people will say that time heals all wounds, and I disagree with that completely. Time does not heal all wounds. You may
Yes.
scar over, but it doesn't heal all wounds. And so what the other side of the chart showed was the hole was the same size, right?
Mhm.
It was no smaller than it was the day the loss happened.
Mhm.
So 5 years later, the hole was the same size. That hole that you feel like there's a part of me missing, that was still there. And it was the same size. It didn't heal, it didn't get smaller. It was the same size. But the rest of the picture had expanded. And so now it was not 100% of the frame. It was
Oh.
10% of the frame. But the
Mm.
hole was the same size. And that made sense to me. because people would say, well, time heals all wounds, just give it time. It's like, no, it doesn't. That hole is still there. It's
Right.
there to this day. It'll be there until the day I die. And it will be whatever size hole that is in my heart will be the exact same size. But if I move forward, then I can have other experiences and it can become a smaller percentage of my life, right?
Right.
And so that made sense to me. Like I could live with a smaller percentage
Mhm.
because the whole was still 100% of the size it was. I didn't feel like it diminished the loss in a certain way, but I
Right.
could increase my life around it.
Yes.
And that meant that seemed to me to say, well, the whole is there, so he'll still be with you because his loss is there. So you're not
Right.
going to forget him because the whole, that's part of the thing. Again, visually, I apologize. It's just the way I see
It's
things.
good. No, this is really good.
Like if you feel like that somehow that hole will go away or diminish, then it kind of feels like you're leaving the person behind. To me,
Mhm.
it kind of feels like I
Yes.
would leave. But if I could get my head around the hole will never be smaller than it is,
Mhm.
then I felt like, well, then he'll be with me.
Right.
But while
Right.
he's with me, I need to expand. I need to make the choice to expand my life.
Mhm.
And that's what I worked with my wife and my children on. We used to go on cruises when they were small because it was the only way we could afford really to have, six people. They had to have two staterooms, but it was the only way we could afford really. Like if you wanted to kind of all-inclusive kind of thing, that was the less expensive way to do it. So it was a long time before I get back on a cruise ship.
Mhm.
Long time. Like I just did that the end of last year was my first time getting back on a cruise ship. I had to go to a different cruise line. I had to make it a different
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
But those experiences now are separate from the experiences I had with him.
Right.
And now it's my wife and I having an experience. So I think it's just bringing them forward to me was realizing that the hole would always be there and,
Yeah.
and really the same size.
Yeah.
But so what I'm doing is I'm taking him forward as I expand my life.
Yeah.
And it gave me the ability to not have to choose
Right.
going forward or leaving him behind. I could do both.
Yeah.
I could bring
Yeah.
him, and that's not easy. And I'm not saying like I say it like it's terribly difficult, a lot of crying, heartache, pain, but I could, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
And so there are days when I don't want to, but then I remember this, he's with me. So we go forward, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I love the word pictures. I think that's going to be really helpful to our listeners also. And I think I always like to end with a glimmer of hope. And I actually think that's what this just did. Like for people who are listening who are really in the dark part of this, for them to hear you say that you can move forward without feeling like you've left them behind, I think that does give a glimmer of hope. So I really appreciate you sharing that in that kind of detail.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, if one person hears it and maybe they can just not quit, but take one more step forward, then it's worth it, right? It's worth it, and I hope they do. It's a sincere hope and prayer that they will not quit. Whoever is supposed to hear this, that they will not quit, and that they will realize they can move forward.
That's right. I really appreciate you sharing with us today. It has been an honor to hear your story, and I do believe it's going to reach those who need to hear it. And I also want to make sure people remember the details about your book in the show notes so
Thank
they
you.
and also if they want to reach out to you, maybe they
Yeah,
can.
askandycampbell.com.
Okay.
It kind of came around because people would ask me, how are you still alive? And then,
Yeah.
so, for anybody who has the solid tumor cancer, I put my protocols out there, what I've done,
Oh,
the way I
good.
look at it. And there's a place there where you can contact me or sign up for updates. You
Okay.
can contact me on askandycampbell.com.
All right. Well, we'll include all of that in the show notes. And I really appreciate you sharing today. I think
Yeah,
it's these words are going to matter, and I appreciate you sharing them.
I appreciate that sincerely because we go through these things and they shouldn't all be for nothing. So I appreciate very much you saying that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.